Hello, Vanessa Otero. Thank you for agreeing to talk with me and through me to the students in this Global Online Academy Flex course.
It's great to be here. Thank you so much.
I want to ask you, first of all, about your journey into this process as a lawyer. I was wondering if you ever thought about being a journalist or had an interest in that before.
Actually, no, I never had an interest in being a journalist. I've just always been interested in politics mainly, and I love reading. I love writing. I love analysis. My undergraduate degree is in English literature, actually, from UCLA, and I went into the practice of law. I've been a patent attorney for 5 years. And a couple of years ago, I've kind of gotten into this field by accident. I was surprised by the kind of news sources that I'd seen people post on Facebook and Twitter, mostly to support their side of a political argument in the run-up to the 2016 election. And it really just the quality and the extreme bias in the sources really surprised me. And I just thought that there should be a way to visualize this on a vertical and horizontal axis. So I kind of cobbled together just on one of the programs I used to create patent drawings this initial media bias chart. And I had never intended for it to become, say, such a big thing, but it went viral on the internet, it got very popular, and folks from around the country and world started reaching out. So I decided to pursue it, and now I've made a company out of it.
Very good. And you acknowledge in some of your blog posts that it's hard, especially maybe the part about bias and detecting bias. And yet you persist and say we have to do it anyway. I think a lot of people kind of throw up their hands and say, we're all biased. Who knows how to figure it out? I'm not going to try.
Yeah, exactly. But if it was hard, then everyone. If it was easy, then everyone would do it. And a lot of the solutions, really big, important solutions that affect our society. Whether it be like in science or social science fields or arts, things that are hard to do are usually worth doing. And that's why I think it's so important that even though it is difficult to do what we're doing, which is content analysis, that the answers are there. We can find the answers in the text if we look closely enough and we train ourselves how to do it. And it can become easier over time. I think that we're in this temporary moment where the amount of information that's available to us has temporarily outstripped our ability to process it. Like there's so much information everywhere on the internet. How do we deal with it? We will get better. Students today are learning how to cope in this information environment and will be better than people who have only dealt with fewer sources in their lifetime. So yeah, it's not worth saying like, oh, we can't figure it all out, so let's not. If we that approach to a lot of problems, we'd still be facing some of the same ones that we faced throughout humanity.
Do you see a role for AI and algorithms in sort of streamlining the information flow or improving it in some way?
Yeah, absolutely. So one of the challenges right now is that there's almost infinite content out there. I have a media bias chart with 100 sources on there, and it's already full, right? But 100 sources is just a drop in the bucket of the number of sources that are out there. And every single day, the millions of new pieces of content are published. And the companies, the big tech companies, Facebook and Google and Twitter, they have and what definitely shouldn't be on there, and trying to balance out the editorializing. Now they have lots of resources in terms of AI and software and even human resources to get this done. But like you said, it's a really hard problem, and it's one that I think cannot quite yet be solved very accurately through artificial intelligence. The reason why is, and there are some efforts out there where people are trying to do this. They're trying to analyze, use software an AI to analyze word counts in articles, or even certain partisan terms, terminology, trying to count those and measure the sentiment or measure like the left and rightness of it. But because there's so much context and there's so much nuance, and there are things that are really hard to measure in a text, like omission bias, because you can't quite measure all of those things, then you will get some pretty wrong results. So if you try to do this process of quality analysis and bias analysis through AI, and your correctness is 70-80%, that's a really bad result. It's much better to do a smaller sample, we think, and get really highly accurate results that are measured by, they're tested still by having multiple different humans with different biases actually rate them, but a human has the ability that computers don't have to take in the context and the nuance and the omission, and that's just something that will take. We can do it with AI. It's just going to take a little while to get there. We plan on doing that.
Very interesting. Well, to dig into your process a little bit, I was struck when I first tried applying it, and how clarifying and kind of calming it was to just do that first step of writing out the sort of basic positions that are out there on a given issue. So, the left, center, right perspective. And I just wonder, how do other people experience it that way, or how do you experience this process that you've developed?
I think that's a good way to put it. To define exactly what is left, right, and center, it does take away a lot of the uncertainty and helplessness that people feel, because if you look at the chart, it intuitively makes sense to people, but then they start looking at the categories, and then it gets really philosophical right away. Like, well, what does neutral even mean? Is there such thing as neutral? And, well, what's left today is not what's left in other countries or what was left, 50 years ago. So what do we do with all of that? And so all you have to do is anchor somewhere. And that process of defining what's left, right, and center is a process of anchoring. So the media bias chart itself, the left-right axis is anchored in a particular way. It's the United States. It is contemporary, meaning now, and it's anchored by the positions of elected officials. So why do we choose, it's kind of obvious why we choose U.S., because it's U.S. news sources, and you'd have to do different ones for France or Australia or Canada or Japan, right? So if contemporary makes sense too, because what's left and right now is not what was left and right 50 years ago, and is not what will be left in U.S. political elected officials' positions, is because that's something that's it's the most anchored of the things that we could measure. Like, we could measure, what the media says, but we're measuring the media, so that's not a very good anchor. We could also measure like what the citizens think, but that's also that's less concretely defined. You have to use polls, you have to look on social media, but what politicians do and say is part of official records. They say these things on interviews, they say these things in legislative halls, and they post them on their websites and put them on their platforms. So we can anchor using those, and that is really calming because then you can say, all right, well, this line means hyperpartisan right or skews right, and this line means hyperpartisan left skews left, and we can compare. Comparing is one of the things that also makes people a little bit calmer. You have to. That's one of the ways we analyze things as humans, just naturally.
Very cool. I'd like to take an example of a specific story in the news, and it's one that we're going to be looking at next in the second week of this course, about the Kentucky high school student who kind of got into this face-off at the Lincoln Memorial with a Native American activist. And that short video clip went viral, and it was reported pretty much everywhere.
Mm-hmm.
And the initial reporting pretty much everywhere was wrong, I
Mm-hmm.
think. And
Yeah.
then the subsequent reporting, came down to maybe differing interpretations. And I don't know if we really ever quite found out what happened there, or if there is one version of an authoritative version of what happened there. But I'd love to hear your
Right.
comments.
Right. I think it's a really good example of how uh, the echo chambers and the hyper partisan nature of like the of low quality news. Well, let me define that a little bit more clearly. I think fundamentally one of the problems in our contemporary media landscape is a proliferation of low quality and highly biased sources, and there's just a ton of that. It's profitable. There are many new sources that don't have long-standing reputations that make money just by getting people on their side really amped up about something. And so, we live in a kind of a tense political times right now because of lots of reasons, but one of them being the existence of these very polarizing, low-quality news sources. So, a lot has to do with how issues are framed in the title and the headline and the graphic, and the lead. Those are the first things that we measure, and and often those things are so much more inflammatory and low quality than the actual articles themselves or the actual content themselves. So how I experienced the first wave of reporting of the news story was on Twitter. People they'd show the clip of the video, and it'd be like the one still of the young man's face with the red hat, and then the a Native American with drums, drumming in front of him. And the headline was usually something like teenage boy in a MAGA hat, like smirks, or just I forget exactly the words that would be used, but they were like, it made it seem like he was definitely doing something very disrespectful to this Native American elder. And so, and the thing was a clip. It was a video clip, and it wasn't very long. I think it was maybe 20 or 30 seconds. And so I saw the headlines, and I'm like, wow, that sounds like pretty terrible. What is in this clip must be pretty terrible. And so I clicked through it, and it really didn't show much else besides, that interaction. He didn't say anything. From the headlines, I was expecting that he said something really rude, or he like made a terrible gesture, or like the people in the background were doing things that were really rude as well. So the difference between what the headline says and the graphic says is really influential in how people perceive the story. And that's one of the things that some of these low quality sources are really irresponsible about, is that they know that not everybody even clicks on the video to watch the whole way through and then decide for themselves. Like if you had seen that video without any commentary, you probably would have come to the judgment like, okay, that was like a awkward, tense confrontation, but nothing was really wrong about that, right? But then it spiraled very, very, very quickly because people are used to, like, news sources that are kind of on the same side as each other will tend to pick up the same storylines from each other. Then it came out that there is more to the story, right? There is videos from other angles. There was a point of view of the young man that said what happened beforehand. There was so there's supporting and contradicting evidence for whatever side you wanted to be on, and it really wasn't like one side did something very wrong and the other side did some and was completely in the right. Like that's certainly not what happened. And a lot of news stories are like that. It's not just cut and dry. It's not simple. It doesn't fit a particular narrative. But when you want to be highly polarizing as an information source because it drives your clicks, you kind of want it to fit neatly into a narrative and take away the complexity. So I think the takeaway from it is to, for one, don't jump to conclusions on Twitter of all places. Okay, and try not to jump to conclusions publicly on social media when you think you know what a story is about, because especially when it comes from one of these polarizing sources, because chances are one of these days you're going to have to eat crow and say, oops, I totally rushed to judgment about that. And that happens, especially when you don't see corroborating reporting. This one was kind of difficult because there was a lot of corroborating reporting right in the beginning.
Well, there's a lot of identical reporting, very limited, just basically the video being presented all over.
Exactly. Yeah, but I think it's helpful to if there's a headline that makes you mad, and there's a clip that goes along with it, watch the clip. There's an article that goes along with it, read the article, see what actually happened, because so many times the headline is worse than the article, and the tweet is worse than the headline. So in order of things to rely on, it's article would be best, headline not so good. Definitely don't rely on what the tweet says.
Thank you. That's very interesting. You've developed a concept, I think it's yours, called information fitness, sort of beyond.
I think so.
Yeah. Can you talk about that a little bit?
Yeah. So, I like to make the analogy between just health and fitness, in terms of like diet and exercise, and information literacy. There are a lot of parallels between like food and exercise, like diet and exercise, and information literacy, like our information diet, and what we call like information fitness, or the type of information exercise, civic exercise that we could do. So when you think about what you can do to be healthy for your body, it really comes down to two things. It's what you take in and what you actively do. So what you consume as your diet, and then your physical activity. So you can limit what you intake, and you can control what you intake in your diet, and make sure that it's high quality, healthy, like lean proteins and vegetables and whole grains, all that good balance. And it's okay to have some other stuff like from time to time, like donuts and fries and soda, but like if you have too much of that, that's gonna be harmful. But the other thing that you can do is actually you only eat so many things during the day, but you can control your energy output and your overall level of fitness by running or biking or lifting weights or what have you. So when it comes to information fitness, I think there are corollaries. Your diet, your information diet, I think should absolutely focus on the lean proteins and vegetables and whole grains, which are fact reporting, actual news, like stuff that's new, timely, relevant, impacts the world, impacts you, impacts your communities, things that are important and you're finding out for the first time. That keeps you informed about your world. And then there's also other stuff that helps you make sense of the world, like analysis, and even opinion. And so we have many resources. There are many great writers out there that think deeply about political issues, and that kind of analysis is really helpful for making sense of the world. So we definitely have to have that in our diet. But what a lot of the stuff that's available now that's out there is opinion. And opinion is kind of like junk food, because lots of folks have opinions, and these are based in facts, but they're not the facts. And if you spend too much time in that area, you can start to feel angry and sad, and that the world's a terrible place, and there's nothing you can do about it because there's so many people that are bad actors, and you're just one person. How can you possibly make a difference? And I say that the way to combat it is not only just limiting your diet of opinion, but doing civic exercise. So these are things that actually make a difference. It's you physically making a difference in the world. And these things are voting, talking to people that you know in your real life about political issues, not just like on Facebook, but actually talking to your neighbors, relatives, friends. Getting into contact with your elected officials is a really big one. Volunteering for political campaigns is also a really big one, because so many times if you're just so much to consume, all the internet, all the Netflix, all the entertainment options that are just so widely available, all the video games. There's so many things that other people create for us to consume, and it makes you feel like you're just one of so many people. But when you actually get involved with something local that can make a difference, like your own elected officials, then you start to feel like you're not just one of many. You're one of the people that can actually influence what the people around you do, what your elected officials do, and it's very empowering. Most people, we have in the United States, we have a House of Representatives, and there are 435 of them. And, there's 330 million citizens in the United States. So it may seem like, those folks in Congress or on TV, on the news, are unreachable. But each one of those, like your congressperson, has an office or several offices in your district. You can go to that office. You can call that office. If you pick up the phone and call them right now, somebody will answer the phone. You can tell them what you think about the issue, and they will deliver that message to your congressperson. They're running for re-election every 2 years. You can go to their events and hear them speak. And when you have like a one-on-one interaction with a person that you actually see on TV laws, it solidifies that connection and makes you realize that they're not different from you. You can impact what they say and do, and in turn impact the laws that they make that influence your life. So all these little actions that make you feel empowered are kind of the opposite of helplessness. And it's a virtuous cycle. Like when you exercise, you feel good, you have endorphins, you want to eat healthy. You don't just want to like throw it all away because you spend all that energy. When you go and vote, when you help a friend register to vote, when you sign a petition, when you donate to a cause that is meaningful to you, when you start your own project in your local neighborhood to get some kind of civic change instituted. You talk to your state representatives, your city council, those people even closer to you, even easier to access. Then it's not just a matter of sitting back and consuming opinion. Sitting and watching CNN, you can feel like there's absolutely nothing you can do about anything in the world. But then going out and doing something, you get the exact opposite feeling. And I think that's really important.
And I suppose that we might be more astute consumers of the news if we have some background of participating in issues and see how those are reported. If we've ever attended a public meeting, for example, and then read a news account of it, we begin to see how news is created, and that makes us better observers of it.
Absolutely. Like you get to witness the primary source. And whenever somebody, puts together like a news story for you, they're summarizing it through their own lens. You'll even notice that if you watch the entire State of the Union address, what a story about the State of the Union address cannot cover the whole thing in itself, right? So you can watch a 45-minute speech, and then if you read a news story about it, there's going to be a march. You go to a march and you see all the people that were there, and you see all the signs, and you see what it took to organize it, and spend all the time that you spend there, and then you read a story about it, and you're like, okay, well that's just one lens, it's one view into it, and it can absolutely give you a perspective on how things actually work. It's you can get a lot of information from just reading about it, but going and doing it is a whole different thing.
Well, to the students in this course, the title is what we're all trying to figure out, which is what to believe. And navigating the news today is our goal, and kind of coming up with a personal plan for that.
Mm-hmm.
Any further thoughts or words of wisdom for the students who are watching?
Yeah. Yes. You are smart and you can do this. So I don't know how many of you drive yet, but if you, when you learn to drive, if you've already done this, you've experienced it. It's very overwhelming at first because there's so much information to take in. There is just, there are a million, auditory and visual stimulants that your brain has to process. And it can feel like you want to like freeze because you don't know what's important to pay attention to. But after a while, you realize what's important to pay attention to. You train yourself what's important to pay attention to. And these exercises, these media bias and quality identifying exercise, like identifying what the topic is, identifying what the left-right positions are, identifying like the headline, lead, the graphic, the sentences. This trains you to know what to pay attention to when you're reading an article. If you don't train yourself to do that, then it can become very overwhelming because the pace with which information is thrown at us is very, very quick, especially on TV. You see a bunch of pictures, bunch of video, the anchor's talking to you, anchor's asking pundits a bunch of questions, the 5 pundits are all talking at you. There's like so much to take in. And each sentence you have time to like really think about what is being said to you. But when you do these exercises, you take some time to think, all right, this is a headline. What does this headline say? Like, is this fair? And then you can, pretty quickly come to a conclusion about this. This picture, is this a fair picture or is it biased? You can come to a conclusion quickly about this. So you can do that methodically, step by step, but that teaches you what to pay attention to. And then over time, it becomes easier. You become faster at it. And then eventually it becomes second nature. So you practice this and do this over and over, then you can get very, very proficient. The best way to get proficient at knowing what to trust is to read laterally across many sources and do these kind of exercise across many sources. It does seem daunting and like a lot of work at first, but then you can be one of the folks that's trained to do this, and soon you'll find that you can pick up when something is low quality or highly biased like that. And that's really powerful because there are a lot of adults that are unable to do that right now. And because people are unable to distinguish between high quality, okay quality, and terrible quality news, we suffer consequences as a society. Like when you can't tell what information is good, you don't make very good decisions as a citizen. So, because you're training yourself to do this, hopefully you and others in your peer cohort learn this as just a matter of course. When your children learn to read in the media landscape, you'll be extremely well equipped to teach them, how to deal with it as well. So we will get better at this. You are going to get good at this just by virtue of practicing.
Thank you. That's fascinating. And last thing to talk about is just what's happening with Advantes Media, and you're in the process of training new people, I think, now to
I am.
Work. What is that like?
Oh, it's a lot of fun. It's a lot of work. I'm still a full-time patent attorney, but this is a really fun project. So we recruited 20 analysts, and they have political views from across the spectrum, left, right, center, and they are from all over the country, various different backgrounds. But they're all very dedicated individuals. They like the challenge of analyzing the news, and we're training them in Adfontes Media methodology, which is like what you're learning right now, and how to rate the news. So we're doing a study of approximately 2,000 articles and TV shows. So we're doing like the three major cable news TV shows, a good portion of them. So each of the analysts over the next 10 weeks or so, we're going to train. They're going to analyze these articles. Each article is going to be, and show is going to be analyzed by 4 different people. So somebody left, right, and center, and then a wild card. Just to make sure that we get a good balance of ratings. And so for each source, we'll have at least 15 individual articles rated, and that some will have up to 90, some of the bigger sources. And that kind of research data is going to be made available so people can see it on an interactive version of the media bias chart. So just imagine like the media bias chart that you've seen, but then you click on the New York Times, and then everything else on the chart falls away, and all you see is like the dots of all the 90 New York Times articles that we've rated, because some of them are going to be like, right in the middle, fact reporting, neutral, and some are going to be like a liberal opinion column or a liberal conservative, conservative opinion column are going to be in the opinion sections. So it'll be pretty easy to see how we come up with those ratings, because everyone always asks the question like, New York Times, you have that as fact reporting but skews liberal, but what about this one article that's conservative in opinion? Well, we do take that into account. Overall source ranking is a composite weighted score of the individual article rankings. So we plan to do that a lot in the future, but this is really our first multi analyst research project that we're implementing. So I'm excited about it.
That does sound exciting. I'm just doing the quick math here. You said 2,000 stories read by 4 people, and there are 20 of them. Does that mean about 400 stories per person?
Yes.
That's a lot.
It is. And so it's an abbreviated methodology. So it's not the full, because the full article ranking methodology is, as you've seen, you could take like an hour to do one article. And our strategy will adjust as we do additional research projects. So we do like fuller ratings and more articles over time.
Awesome. Well, good luck to you. And thank you so much for talking to us.
Yeah, my pleasure.
All right.